Hi. So I'm Bethany Webb. I'm going to show you some pictures. This is a picture of me and my sister Laura at my wedding. She was my maid of honor. This is a picture of me and Laura. I like this one because it shows the smile and you can see the kind of person she was. A beautiful, loving, incredible woman. And I brought a shirt. I was going to wear it, but I didn't. I decided not to. This is Laura and Victoria Buzo. She died with my sister. Both of them died 3 months after this picture was taken in the Seal Beach shooting, if you're all familiar with it. So I wanted to talk to you about what you're asking, what the death penalty asks of us, of the families. My sister, my family, my loved ones, we choose to remember Laura as a loving and beautiful person. It doesn't matter to me if it's 5 years or 30 years that you want us to hold on to what the DA, what the death penalty is asking us is to become a person filled with hate, a person that believes that murder for penalty is acceptable. The man that murdered my sister wanted to kill his wife. So that was his excuse. He believed he was angry enough and he had justification for murdering her. That's what this says, is that there's a justification for murdering somebody who is not a threat to you. I'm a mother of 2 boys. I do not teach my children that if somebody punches them, they're to go out and punch him harder. That is not the message. That is my message. That was my sister's message. That was Victoria Buzo, who I knew for 20 years that died with my sister. My mom was the sole survivor of that shooting. She was also shot. She asked me to tell you as well that you do not represent her. You do not represent my sister. And I'm going to show you one more shirt. We do a walk every year, what these shirts are. These are the 8 people that died with my sister. Our motto is, love is louder. We all decided, we all walked together to deny, to reject hatred. And the premise that somehow you can shorten this this thing to hold us into that hatred, and then at the end of this time, I'm going to feel better. You're going to give me justice. You're going to make Laura's murder okay because I murdered somebody else, because I became him. I reject that. You do not murder in my name. I am not like him. I am better than him. We are better than the people that do this. And every day that you sit and say, we are like you, but we're better, how does that sound to him? You give them justification. You say, okay, you're a murderer. You were mad. You were angry. You wanted justification. Well, we're mad. We're angry. We want justification. What separates us from that? I reject being anything like him. And I think it's time that we, California, because the alternative we're going to hear is we could be more like Texas. We could start mass producing murder. Well, I'm sorry, but California is better than Texas. No offense to anybody that's from Texas, but we're better than Texas. We have to be better than Iran and better than Saudi Arabia. The company we keep matters, and what we do at the end of the day, who we are and how we do it matters. So whatever you decide, you don't decide for the victims' families. You cannot, we will not feel better at the end by watching another person murdered. And if we do, what separates us from the very person you want us to hate? That's it.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your compelling testimony, each of you. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Mr. Leno?
First of all, thank you for your very powerful and compelling presentation. For purposes of full disclosure, I know I'm not the only one on this committee who have been opposed to the death penalty for my entire adult life. And I want to thank you, Ms. Webb, for your passionate explanation as to your opposition. And from your own personal experience, no one speaks with greater credibility. So thank you for being here. Ms. Mitchell, you had mentioned, and I think Mr. Farrell did as well, that we are the only Western developed nation that still has the death penalty, and state after state after state is dropping the death penalty. Could you give us an idea of the existing nations on planet Earth who do have the death penalty?
Well, China and North Korea, we know, have many executions, but we don't know how many. We just guess. Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iraq. Those are the top countries which continue to execute.
And the United States.
And the United States is after that.
Well, I would agree with Ms. Webb. We are noted by the company that we keep. I think a former president referred to many of these nations as the axis of evil, whether one agrees with that or not. There were so many human faces that were put on Prop 34, and I had the pleasure of meeting Frankie Carrillo at the time. For those who may not know his name, I think he was 16 or 17 when he was condemned to death.
He was not actually sentenced to death. He was convicted of first-degree murder, and I'm not sure if it was a term of years or life without the possibility of parole, but basically he was sentenced to die in prison.
He was sentenced to die in prison.
Essentially.
Right, right. Well, thank you for that correction. And after about 20-some years, he was in his mid-30s when he was exonerated. 6 witnesses who had claimed they had seen him commit this murder from a distance that was unrealistic. Each of the 6 recanted their testimony, and he was deemed to be factually innocent. So we know these things happen. I think given that other states, and Mr. Chair, I think you made a good point, and I know that the LAO said they would help us out with finding some of these numbers, but we know states in recent times have gone from the death penalty to no longer having the death penalty. And what are the rates of homicide in those states? Do you have any additional information you can give us?
I'm not aware of any data that suggests that the homicide rates have gone up in any of those jurisdictions that have repealed.
Do we know if they have gone down?
I think, as Mr. Soderberg was explaining, the study conducted by the National Academy of Sciences, they just said reliable data is hard to come by. So there wasn't really any clear indicator one way or the other. And
can you substantiate this number I've got in my head of only 1 in 10 homicides is actually prosecuted in California?
You know, I heard you say that, and I don't know if that's right. I also remember the same figure I think Mr. Soderberg mentioned, which is around 50% of homicides go unsolved. And I don't know.
You said of crimes or of homicides?
I believe it was overall crimes, but it could have been homicides too.
Okay.
And
Sure.
And then I don't know if you're distinguishing between prosecuting versus guilty pleas, because I know if you take out the guilty pleas, that 10% number may be accurate.
Right, right. Mr. Chair, I'll just close with another story that's fresh in my mind. There's a very powerful book written by Brian Stevenson, who's argued successfully before the U.S. Supreme Court in any number of exoneration cases, also was the attorney who argued in the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, which led to the determination that life without the possibility of parole for someone under 18 is unconstitutional. It's considered cruel and unusual punishment. In any case, in his book, and I met this gentleman in San Francisco, he came with Mr. Stevenson for an event where he spoke about a 55-year-old African-American man who, when he was in his early 20s, was arrested for a murder which he claimed he did not commit and was subsequently prosecuted, convicted, and condemned to death. This is in the state of Alabama. And he was mowing his mother's lawn at the time in rural Alabama when police came and arrested him. I guess the county sheriffs arrested him. And for some hours, they wouldn't even tell him why he was being arrested. When he was finally told The sheriff said, "You're being charged with first-degree murder." And he sighed relief because he said, "I know I didn't do that." And the sheriff said, "Well, I wouldn't be so relieved if I were you. You will be convicted," he said with certainty. And he said, "Why would you say such a thing to me?" He said, "Because you're black, the arresting officers are white, your prosecutor will be white, your jury will be white, and your judge will be white." He was actually told these things. It took 30 years of his claiming his innocence, finally making connection with Brian Stevenson, who took his case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. How he was determined to be innocent was that he was not in possession of a firearm, but his mother had one in her house, and law enforcement confiscated that weapon. Through forensics, it was determined that the caliber of the bullet used in the murder could not have come from her gun. But it took 30 years of trying and Brian Stevenson taking the case all the way to the Supreme Court. So I know that the hearing today is not about the sad fact that we have innocent people convicted, and I have worked with my Democratic as well as Republican colleagues in this House to advance rights for those who allege their innocence and changing state law so that they have a greater opportunity to prove their innocence. But I think the issue before us here today is, aside from the passionate arguments that Ms. Webb has just brought us, unless we can be really certain, with beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we are not condemning innocent people to death, I think we should all, as a state, really take great pause and reconsider what we're doing, because we know innocent people are convicted of all sorts of crimes. Unless we are certain we're not condemning them to death, we should be giving this second thought.
Can I say something to that? Oh, I can't.
Thank you, Mr. Leto. Mr. Monty?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would it be appropriate if I asked Ms. Webb if she wanted to add anything to her?
Ask any question you want, Mr. Monty.
I would. When a couple of things, because I don't know if you're familiar with the Seal Beach shooting. A gunman walked in and he shot 9 people, 8 of whom died. My mom was the sole survivor. When you read that, there were other people there. They saw this person do this. He walked out. People in the bar next door saw him. They followed him in his car. He was arrested 2 blocks away. He confessed to it. He had 3 guns and a bulletproof vest on. And done. Why am I here? I mean, I'm here for a different reason. But where's my case? My case is being appealed by Kamala Harris because the district attorney and the sheriff's department decided that they didn't have enough evidence. They really wanted the death penalty. So they illegally put an informant in the cell next to what was a slam dunk case. And the judge has since thrown the Orange County's district attorney off. The New York Times has written about how far back the illegal use of informants go. We go, my mom and I go every time there's a court hearing to represent my sister when he's there. I have watched these informants clearly lie, but I also watch sheriff's guys take the fifth and not answer really easy questions. Last week, a man that had been convicted of double murders was let go, walked the streets. 18 years ago, they found out that the Orange County Department had illegally used informants. This is going to be a problem. I mean, you're going to have appeals we know for people for 18 years that went through the 6th largest county in the state where illegal informants were used. And to the point of killing innocent people, when he was interviewed, I don't speak his name, when he was interviewed and he was asked, why did he kill everybody else? He wanted Michelle. He called them collateral damage. My sister was collateral damage. Well, collateral damage is murdering an innocent person. When you're trying, okay, so we're pretty sure that 9 out of 10 of these guys did it. We're a little foggy on one, but, the odds are that we're going to kill most of the bad people. So some collateral damage is okay. Well, as somebody whose sister died as collateral damage, I'd like you to look at one of the innocent people's sister and say, sorry, they were collateral damage, but the other 9 people we executed were okay.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. And I do want to thank you for being here today and for your courage as you framed in your earlier testimony. It reminded me of statements made by Clarence Darrow defending 2 guilty young men who premeditated the murder of a young Bobby Franks, the Loeb Leopold case. And Clarence Darrow chose to take that case to a judge only. And in his closing argument, he turned on his clients and he chastised them for their heinous acts, for their illegal acts. They'd pled guilty. And his only appeal to the judge was why the judge should spare their lives. And he argued the only thing more reprehensible than what these young men had done would be for civil society to premeditate their execution. And the judge did give them life without possibility of parole. One, I believe, committed suicide in prison. One became a world-renowned ornithologist, expert on birds, and salvaged his life in that manner. But for you to carry your sister's memory by not wanting to replicate the horror manifested by the man who took her life, I applaud that courage in your being here today. I did have a question, Mr. Chair. I think for Ms. Mitchell, just clarification. Could you provide for the committee your understanding of this ballot measure that would eliminate the death penalty in California? It would convert those currently on death row to life without possibility of parole. Could you expand a little bit on what that means? Are there any exceptions, or does life without possibility of parole mean life without possibility of parole?
It means life without the possibility of parole, with the only exceptions being if their evidence comes to light subsequent that it was a wrongful conviction, that the person has been wrongfully convicted, or if one of the special circumstances, evidence supporting the special circumstances, which gets the without the possibility of parole part, is later overturned, then it would be the sentence that person would be resentenced to some term of years or some other sentence.
But that would be subject to a court review
Yeah,
and a reevaluation of the evidence
Exactly.
that they were originally convicted on.
Yes.
The governor still has the power of commutation. I think rarely exercised, but someone who is sentenced to life without possibility of parole could have that sentence commuted by the governor.
Thank you.
And the governor has that power now for people
Correct.
on death row.
That's not a newly established power by this ballot measure.
Right.
And then maybe for Mr. Farrell, and just a preface to thank you for your long-term advocacy and, again, coming from a deep-rooted sense of human rights and trying to lift our society to a level that does not excuse crime, but treats it in a manner similar to other civilized nations. I want to thank you for that leadership. Do you know other states that have abolished the death penalty by means of ballot measure, or for anyone on the panel? I know some have been by executive order, some have been by courts. Have others done it through the ballot?
They've all been done, as far as I'm aware, through either the legislature or the governor. I'm not sure about Massachusetts in '84 or Rhode Island, but I believe it's all been through the legislature. If I might just add, a response to Senator Leno's point about the horror stories. Frankie Carrillo, who was, as suggested, exonerated after 20 years in a California prison for a crime he did not commit, just graduated from college.
Thank you for that. And again, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the panel.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the panel who have questions?
I'd just like to join my colleagues in thanking all of you for being here. In the end, these are fiscal issues. They're also deeply ethical issues and go to the root of who we are as a people. And Ms. Webb, really, thank you for turning hate into something else. That's, I think, very important. We're looking now at whether there are ways to do that in many, many parts of our society and many parts of the world. And I know for me, the original death penalty legislation that is similar but not the same as this that I introduced was a result of the Alarcón report that came out a number of years ago that Mr. Ullman referred to. I remember that report excoriated the legislature for not taking action, but now we have before us the initiative, and hopefully we'll set a precedent there. But thank you so much for your very thoughtful comments.
And I want to thank each of you. Not only were you articulate and you were pinpointed the issues, and I believe you educated this public and everyone else, but most important, you were on time.
Yes.
But you still were able to be passionate about what you're doing, and I think as witnesses, you served yourselves well. And so I thank you as chair of this committee, along with my co-chair here, for informing everyone. So thank you. And now we'll have testimony from the opponents. Mark Peterson, Contra Costa County District Attorney; Doug Villars, President, California Association of Highway Patrolmen; Michelle Hanesi, President, Los Angeles County Association of Deputy District Attorneys; Kent Sledinger, Legal Director and General Counsel, Criminal Justice Legal Foundation; and Nina Lasarno, President, Crime Victims United of California. So we have 5 people and 30 minutes so we can get in question. As you can tell, our committee is very involved and has questions. So
thank you.
If you can keep it at about 6 minutes apiece, or if you want to break it up any differently, you can.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Nina Salarno. I'm the president of Crime Victims United. I bring to this panel a very unique perspective. Not only am I a former prosecutor, I was the very first state director of the Office of Victim Services and implemented the death penalty notification program for victims. I, too, am a murder victim. My sister Katina Slaughter was murdered execution style at the University of Pacific. And while I sympathize with Ms. Webb, I bring to this panel, like I said, a very unique knowledge. Ms. Webb is courageous for her testimony. However, she is not the representative of the victims. When I was the director of the Office of Victim Services and as the president of Crime Victims United, I had personal contact with almost every victim associated with those whose inmates were condemned to death. All of them. It is not hatred, and I would like to correct this panel on that. All of them want justice. Seeking a death penalty is justice for victims. It is not hatred. And I bring to you what the death penalty really does do. I was intimately involved in the execution of Darrell Keith Rich, a man who in 1979 sexually assaulted 11 women, brutally murdering 9 of them, including a 12-year-old child that he threw off a 101-foot bridge and let her bleed to death over 24 hours. As I walked out of the execution chamber that night with the rape victim, the surviving rape victim, whose head had been smashed and disfigured by a rock, she said, "Thank you." And I said, "For what?" "For the first time, I will sleep tonight because I will not worry that a court, a governor, or anyone will overturn this sentence and he will be released and finish his job." And as to your point, has anybody ever been released off death row? Yes. Robert Lee Massey was a man who murdered an elderly couple in Orange County, was sentenced to death, and under the Rosebud Court had his sentence commuted to life without parole, then commuted again to life with parole, was released to San Francisco County and murdered a father of 5 7 months later. Effectively, if this were to pass, it is not automatic that each and every one of these inmates will serve life without parole. To answer the panel's question, what then happens is they get a resentencing hearing where they get to challenge the very circumstances that let them, that a jury decided were heinous enough to sentence them to death. So in effect, you're not only putting the victims through a second trial, you are allowing them to then be tortured, as my family is, because the murder of my sister, because circumstances were different, got life with parole, and we are now facing, in July 13th, our 10th parole hearing. There is nothing more onerous for a victim of crime than to deal with the possibility that the murderer of their loved one will be paroled. For these families, even though it's taking a long time for justice to come to them, knowing that the person cannot be paroled, knowing that they do not go through a resentencing hearing, is a sense of peace. And to take away the ultimate justice and peace that they deserve, that is incorrect. And each of these victims had the ability to voice. I would also point out that this amendment is unconstitutional. This state overwhelmingly in 2008 passed Marsy's Law. Marsy's Law implemented 2 things: a truth in sentencing and the right for the victim to be heard before any inmate is resentenced for the sentence that they are serving. There is nothing in this initiative that provides for that provision. There is nothing in this initiative that provides that the victim will be heard if and when this passes and they are resentenced. There is no provision for that. That makes this unconstitutional. This is usurping what the people of California voted in overwhelmingly when they voted in Marsy's Law. Also, it does not cut down on the number of trials. It still provides there has to be a penalty phase for those who are going to be sentenced to life without parole. They still have to go through 2 trials, just like we do in the death penalty phases. The other thing it does, back on Marsy's Law, is it takes away the victim's right to be heard if they are willing to agree to a lesser plea bargain. Obviously, the death sentence is the ultimate. If you take that away, then life without the possibility of parole becomes the ultimate sentence. Therefore, the victim has really no way to voice, well, maybe instead of death, our family will agree to life without possibility of parole. You're taking away their right, their constitutional right, to be heard. And last, I would point out to you, money does not replace anything. Let me explain to you, as a victim who has lived 36 years without her sister, who has watched my parents suffer after parole hearing to parole hearing. The fact that you're saying we're going to up it from 50% to 60% means nothing to victims to crime, because all the inmate has to do is keep their books below 60%, and there is no restitution paid. And I do find this, as a side note, that the initiative directs the savings to the general fund instead of the victim restitution fund. So I believe this was done without thought for the victims. And again, as I said, I sympathize with Ms. Webb. I know what it's like to bury a sister. I also know what it's like to relive that murder every 1 to 5 years, because I sit through each and every parole hearing. For those victims associated with the condemned, you are giving them the ultimate sense of peace. Whether or not they die on death row of natural causes or they are actually executed, you are still allowing that victim to live in peace. And I ask, this initiative takes that away, and most importantly, it takes away their constitutional rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Mark Peterson. I am the District Attorney of Contra Costa County. I've been a Deputy District Attorney for 30 years. I've been the elected District Attorney for the last 5 years, and it is the 9th largest county in Contra Costa County. I'm also a representative of the California District Attorneys Association, which consists of the 58 elected district attorneys that make the decisions as to who would face the death penalty. I personally tried 5 death penalty cases. What I'd like to share with you a little bit are facts about the death penalty. The death penalty has been in existence in California since 1850, over 150 years. This is an effort to repeal a law that's been in existence for 150 years. It's not a recent invention of let's get tough on crime. It's supported by the citizens of California. 31 other states, as you have heard, have a death penalty. This law that currently exists is supported by the citizens of California, your constituents, the people that voted you into office. They've reaffirmed their support, probably perhaps the only time in state history where the whole state has been asked, please tell us how you feel about this. We'd like to know 9 times since 1972 how you feel about the death penalty. 9 times your citizens, my citizens, the citizens of this state, the voters of this state has said we support a death penalty at the ballot box. This initiative is supported by a vocal minority of rich individuals who are philosophically opposed to the death penalty, who are misleading the voters, hoping that they will tire of having to address this issue, and misleading them about the costs that will be saved. The facts also are the death penalty is rarely sought. In my county, a county 9th largest in the state, we have 1 death penalty case. Los Angeles County, it was studied for a decade, from 2001 through 2011, had 6,700 murder cases. There were 62 death verdicts returned during that time. In a decade, that's less than 1%. It is rarely ever sought. There's this idea out there that the prisons are full of death row inmates. There are 134,000 prisoners in the California Department of Corrections. There are 750 on death row. That's it. It's very rarely imposed. Yearly, there might be in single digits individuals sentenced to death. And that's because it's reserved for the worst of the worst. Serial killers, mass killers. An individual who might go into San Bernardino County and kill 14 people for perhaps religious or political reasons. It's reserved for people who kill police officers, murder based on race or religion, hate crime murders, or perhaps the individuals that might be murdering several people in my jurisdiction out on the freeways. They're murdering people on the freeways now, on Highway 80, Highway 4. If there are individuals doing that, they've killed multiple people, they would be eligible for the death penalty. Regarding the costs for the death penalty, I agree with the previous questioner that these costs are very illusory. CDC has never found a definitive number as to what it costs to house somebody on death row. They've never provided that number. There still will be appeals. There seems to be some suggestion that because they don't go to the California Supreme Court that these individuals wouldn't appeal their life without parole sentence. Of course they'll still appeal. Their high percentage could already be housed single-celled, even according to CDC. The RAND study, which studied the death penalty, said there is no definitive evidence to really formulate what the death penalty cost. Those are the facts that we're all dealing with. But now it's used as a weapon. The individuals who want to get rid of the death penalty say it'll save costs. But it's all very illusory, all very general. I can give you some facts, though. The average person on death row is 27. The average age of life expectancy is 74. If those 750 people just live their lives out at $50,000 a year, that's $2.5 million. If the death penalty is limited, housing costs alone for those 750 will cost $1.8 billion. $1.8 billion. Those are facts. Those are numbers. There's absolutely no credible evidence that having a death penalty increases crime. I'm not going to argue that it decreases crime. I think the jury's out on that, as the previous speakers have talked about. There's no evidence that an innocent person in the state of California that's on death row has ever been executed. The previous speaker authored a report to that effect. Paula Mitchell in the Alacron-Mitchell report said, California has approached the implementation of its death penalty system with caution, and as a result, no evidence has been presented that the prosecution of persons accused of capital crimes has resulted in the execution of someone who is innocent. They studied it. They looked at it. They examined it. Decades. Hasn't happened. Jerry Brown, who's probably looked on more death penalty cases than any of us, also agrees with that and has been quoted to that effect. Exonerated means lots of different things. I would caution all of us when we use the word exonerated. Does that mean the person was innocent, or does it mean it was reversed on a technicality? So this word exoneration gets thrown around like all these people were innocent in their crimes. Not necessarily the case. Exonerated means different things to different people. I will agree with the previous speaker that California is an outlier. California is an outlier because our length of appeals is over 8 years. Other states, it's 2 to 4 years. The death penalty person, someone convicted of the death penalty on death row, doesn't get an attorney for 4 years. That should be fixed. I agree with the professor who spoke earlier. He was on the Commission of Fair Administration of Justice. I read that report. They said make these changes. The California Supreme Court unanimously said make those changes. So we, law enforcement, California DA's office, came to this very subcommittee 2 years ago and asked you to fix it, asked you to fix the broken process. Never made it out of committee. The reason these competing initiatives are on the ballot because the legislators have refused to fix the problem. There is a problem, but you, the legislatures, respectively, have not fixed it. Death penalty system is not murder, it's not hate, it's not vengeance, it's justice. Comparing us to other cities, or countries, those are hidden persuaders. Say, well, we're like China if we have a death penalty. We're like Saudi Arabia if we have the death penalty. Not true. They don't have a justice system like we do. The protections in place in California are extensive.
Mr. Peterson, you got 6 minutes. And
finally, I would say the death penalty is used sparingly and appropriately. It should be carried out. It should be saved. And the citizens of California support the death penalty.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. And who's next?